Today is Saturday, October 12th, 1996. My sister-in-law Nancy has finally been sentenced for the murder of her husband, John Fitzgerald, my brother. I'm using this mini cassette recorder to document my first visit since the trial to their home in Willowbrook, a town on the other side of the state, to give myself notes on how to get this property in shape for resale. It's been about a 4-hour drive, just a few minutes away from the house now. Well, everyone knows what was revealed during the trial, the evidence provided by the state, the weak defense put up by the court-appointed lawyer representing Nancy. When I was called as a character witness, I really didn't have much to say, not having interacted with John much since we left home as teenagers. I went to college. He didn't. Not much else to that story. We drifted apart. It was at his wedding. Met Nancy there for the first time. She seemed like a normal, quiet girl. He seemed happy. He never had kids. About a year ago, around this time, I was making my coffee when I got a text from a friend asking whether I was okay. Not knowing what he was referring to, I texted back, "Sure, why?" And he told me to turn on the TV, channel 4. There was a news truck. It was parked out on front of my brother's, by my brother's house. The reporter, surrounded by the Halloween leftovers of, an inordinate number of carved pumpkins that lined the street, explained that the police had arrived earlier that morning in response to a neighbor's 911 call. Nancy had been heard screaming. I saw a gurney with what appeared to be a bagged-up corpse pushed into the back of an ambulance. The reporter stood in the front yard while this was going on, and it was obvious that the yard had been replaced as a pumpkin patch with pumpkinless plant sprouts surrounding her feet. The reason she was standing in the yard, though, mainly, was next to her. There was a ditch that had been dug up around her feet. The long and short of it was that John had been murdered, and his body... Okay, hold on. I've made it to the new house. Well, nothing's been done to the yard. It's covered in leaves, overgrown with pumpkin plants. Wow, there are so many pumpkins growing beneath them. There must be hundreds of them. If this goes around to the back, I'm going to need to get some landscaping to get rid of all of this. Okay, I've made it inside the house. Much of this furniture is going to have to be auctioned off or thrown away. Rooms are going to need cleaning, painting. It's going to be easier to sell the house with the hardwood floors exposed. So all this shag carpet that someone in the 60s thought was a neat idea will have to be ripped up. Floors will likely have to be polished, restained. I need to find some scissors, maybe tear out a piece and take a picture of the floor with me to a contractor. I'll start on the second floor and work my way down with these audio notes. The house smells mildewy, like black mold is hiding behind all this plaster and drywall. Smells like someone's growing plants inside the house, a kind of wet, earthy smell, like the inside of a greenhouse or nursery. I don't know where it's coming from. To find a clue, a real smoking gun, to explain all that's happened, that would help. Okay, I found some scissors in the kitchen, and I am now in the master bedroom. I'm just going to cut up a piece of carpet. I guess any is as good as the next, since I'm going to have this all... Oh, there's a slit in the carpet here. Well, that works. Looks like there's something under it. Papers here. What is this? It's Nancy's handwriting. Letters. These are diary entries. 5 of them. Dated up to the day of John's death. Okay, so I've just quickly skimmed through the diary entries, and it looks like there might be something here. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm going to reread them for the recorder, because I think by reading them out loud, I can make better sense of them. All right, here's the first, dated Friday, October 13, 1995, so last year. Nancy wrote this by way of explaining John's and her pumpkin obsession. It seems she was going to be interviewed by the local paper on her pumpkin patch and the 25-year run of founding her neighborhood's annual pumpkin festival. Okay, she says, just some private notes to get my mind in order. Interview with Suzanne at the Gazette this week. I'll start with John and me watching It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown again. That's the show that inspired Pumpkin Lane 25 years ago. That makes this our 25th anniversary. I looked for black markers today at Walmart and found Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas all on top of one another. A nightmare before Christmas kind of thing. The photographer for the Gazette, Billy something or other, came over and got some good pictures of the yard. Our own pumpkin patch this year, but without any pumpkins in it. At least the plants have sprung up. Maybe next year the yard will be full of them, and I'll save a trip out to Marcus's farm. Marcus's farm is called the Great Pumpkins Patch, just off FM 1381. The farm, by the way, is overflowing with double the usual number of pumpkins, so it was easy for Marcus to help John fill our trailer. Still time for people to get theirs. This is her, she continues, the first year we did this was 1970, right after we got married. We just moved into this house. We'd heard our neighborhood was popular with trick-or-treaters, like hundreds of them bust in from poorer areas of the city by their churches. Not that we're in a rich area, so we thought, John and me, why not add to the neighborhood decorations a line of grinning pumpkins with candles inside their bellies to cast eerie shadows on the pathway leading up to our front steps? Some details may be useful. Don't know if Susan will care. Pumpkins are ready to harvest when 1. They are the right color and size. 2. When the stem is hard and brown. 3. When the skin can't be pierced with a fingernail. And 4. When it sounds hollow inside when thumped. Some of the pumpkins I got from Marcus's don't sound very hollow inside. Oh, and this is important. We carve in mid-October. They last right through All Souls Day. It's simple, really. Roll a pumpkin on the block, stab hard through its shell at an angle below the stem, saw around the top till the stem pops out, dig it with hands and scraper and pull out the guts and seeds. Then use a black marker to shape the face and cut out the eyes, nose and mouth, grinning with teeth. The people who thought we were odd with our dozen or so carved pumpkins in 1970 didn't blink when we reached 50 or so pumpkins by 1980. Our neighbors saw the attention our house got each Halloween, saw how much we'd become the centerpiece for the biggest block party of the year. So we set a trend. orange and gold faces that had once led up to our house soon became hundreds from one end of the block to the next. Some were delightful, others were scary, and our street became a Halloween hit. And this is the weekend it all begins. All of us out on our front stoops, carving pumpkins under the changing elm and sycamore leaves. The trailer is in our driveway. John is going to help me. Well, that tells some of the story. Nancy loved her pumpkins, to put it mildly. When she was in court, her own lawyer, court-appointed, let it be known that he suspected she'd gone crazy from carving them, mistaking her husband's head for one. Of course, he didn't say that at the trial, but I overheard him talking to his buddies. Such an odd story. He wanted her to make an insanity plea, at least temporary insanity. She refused, pleading not guilty instead. But the intricate detail in which John's head had been carved, it betrayed her. It was exactly the same style and manner Nancy had used on the several dozen pumpkins she'd carved that season. When I was called to the stand, I'd testified that this isn't the kind of thing that a sane person does, but the state didn't want to see a temporary insanity plea either. So they never followed the angle of my statement. And this gets me to why I'm here in this house, trying to get it ready for sale. Some months ago, Nancy's lawyer told me that Nancy wanted to protect her property by signing it over to me. It took months to get through the transfer paperwork, but the house, the property, the cars, all of it came into my possession in short order. With the final sentencing, I know that she isn't going to be coming back anytime soon. They're going to send her to an upstate, maximum security prison, and she is going to die there. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be thinking good riddance or what, but here's the second entry. It's dated Sunday, October 15th, 1995, and concerns the death of the neighbor. I remember hearing about this on the news when it happened. What an odd way to die. An aneurysm while outside carving a pumpkin. Nancy led this second entry with the story. Something terrible happened yesterday. I've been asked to draft a statement for the police department since I'm a witness to the death of a neighbor. Okay, just to sketch it out before I write it up, formally for the detective. One of our older neighbors, Dorothy Jones, had been working alongside us in her yard over the course of the day. Dorothy's husband died some years ago, so it was just her living there in the house, but she kept up with the neighborhood responsibility year after year. She was the first one, actually, to add to the sidewalk pumpkin collection before the rest of the neighbors started doing it too. She lived in her house longer than any of us and was the kind of person other people in the neighborhood looked up to. Block parties were held in front of her house. She'll be so missed. In any case, I should have been the first to notice it. Around late afternoon, I called into the house for John to ask about dinner, and I saw her raise her eyes over the picnic table where she was carving her pumpkin. I couldn't see the rest of her, just her head. She was staring at me with a slack-jawed grin on her face. I thought it was just weird enough to not return her smile. I set down my tools and went into the house. I cleaned up, prepared, and ate dinner with John, and then came back outside to tidy up the porch. I'd barely reached the door when I heard a screech from another neighbor. I got outside and saw Dorothy still slumped forward with her slack-jawed grin. Another neighbor had ducked inside her house to call 911. Oh dear, the word is that Dorothy got dehydrated and, well, with her age and all, the work was simply too much for her. She died right there, supporting our neighborhood project. We'll pray for her soul at Mass this morning. It was Dorothy who still noticed the trailer was open. She said good morning to me and pointed over to it. John hadn't yet come down to unload the pumpkins, so the trailer should have been locked. John shrugged when I asked him, but I know it had to have been him. Who else would it have been? Maybe he wanted to start early, maybe he was trying to help, but he let one pumpkin roll out of the back. It was cracked on the ground. The lock was inside of it. John will have to be more careful. Dorothy had been one of the first neighbors to start that morning, so I know she was out there for a long, long time, longer than me. I had my tools, hammer, chisel, carving saw, scraper. We'd connected on that right off. "Got everything you need, Dorothy," I yelled over to her. John had gotten all the stuff for me our second year. That's because the first year we almost ruined our kitchen knives. We took the morning and did the first dozen pumpkins. These are the happy ones, eyebrows raised, with broad smiles and one or two teeth. The faces attract the kids. We spent early afternoon on the sad ones, the eyebrows flat and mouths downturned, like the drama theatre mask. John was on top of his game, keeping pace with me as we turned out one beautifully carved sad pumpkin after another. It took us till dusk to do all the scary ones, their faces hideous, eyes that slant down like they're angry, mouths that slant to the sides slack-jawed, and noses that aren't quite noses. John had shown me how to do it. Pop a hole in the spot for the nose, then jack the knife back quickly so the fleshy part of the pumpkin pops forward. Instant nose. Not a hole, but a raised piece of pumpkin meat. The candlelight comes through the nostrils, assisting in the menacing effect. The candlelight comes through the nostrils, assisting in the menacing effect it comes upon, if come upon it in the dark. Candles next. I needed to fill their pumpkin bellies before arranging them on the walkway and down the sidewalk in either direction of the house as far as they would reach. The neighbors' pumpkins were already out. They were lined up. I got back with the candles. It was almost dark. Some cars were coming down the street. They didn't know about the ambulance taking away Dorothy's body either. This may be enough. I don't know if the police will need all of it. That is super weird. Her neighbor died and she was still concerned about getting all these details down. Okay, this leads us to the third entry dated Friday, October 20, the date of the Gazette article that was published. She has that here. Nancy's yard had made the front page, along with a side story about the tragedy of her neighbor's death. It looks like she was starting to write a letter to someone since a clipping of the article was attached, but it's not addressed to anybody, but here it is. The front page, and then she writes the title of the article, Gourd Night, Willowbrook, 25 Years of the Great Pumpkin, an interview with Nancy Fitzgerald. And she says, I've never had my name on the front page of a newspaper before. What a week. Every night, a longer line of cars drives through our street to get a look at the pumpkins. Dorothy would really have loved this. We dedicated this anniversary to her. We staked a memorial sign into the ground at the top of the block. Susan added the dedication to the side article memorializing her. The Tuesday paper carried most of the news about it. We're all in a flurry on where to park our own cars since we don't want their presence on the street to get in the way of the view. This article will bring even more cars tonight. Pumpkin Lane loves cars. I'm setting up a wassail stand tonight. We'll give cups out to the drivers at the top of the street. Sally down the street is going to set up her fog machine. She has styrofoam tombstones all over her yard with clever sayings on them like rest in pieces and born to die. Hope that's not too insensitive to Dorothy. We need to set up a jam box with Michael Jackson's Thriller playing on a loop tape. This is all leading to the big event, Halloween night itself. John said he's going to Sam's to get the big candy this year. We should put out a sign on poster board at the top of the block. Big candy, our 25th year. See the Gazette article, or something like that. I want so many trick-or-treaters that Susan will have to come back and do another article. I'll document the whole night for her. Okay, so this fourth one was dated Sunday, October 29th, and the tone is different, to say that it feels very urgent. Let's see. Turned the clocks back this morning. It's going to get darker soon. It'll be a good and dark Halloween night. I'm worried about the dark. I wonder about the pumpkins. I think they're, well, crowding us, like getting closer on their own. The mean ones with the slack jaws we can see coming. I expect them to be mean and angry. I made them like that. It's the happy ones that are scaring me. I woke up last night to a soft thumping sound, like someone bouncing a basketball on our shag carpets in the living room. Thumpety, thumpety, then stop. Thumpety, 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 then stop. Sometimes there were more than one of the thumpeties at a time. When we got older and got up more at night to go to the bathroom, we started sleeping with the hall light on, but with our bedroom door closed. That gives us some light from under the door to see our way out to the hallway. No bumping into anything that way. So when I heard the thumpeties coming from downstairs, I lifted my head to see over the footstand of the bed and saw a shadow pass by under the door. I elbowed John hard to wake him. He was instantly alert. He raised his head to hear what I was hearing, and then he saw them too. More shadows passing by under the door, like something was rolling past it. John jumped up and waited till the next shadow passed. He pulled the door open. The light from the hallway flooded in, blinding us for a moment. Then nothing. Nothing in the hallway. No thumpety thumps coming from downstairs. John disappeared for a few moments as he searched the house. While he was gone, something rolled across the bedroom floor to my side of the bed and stopped. I looked down. There was enough light from the hallway to see clearly what was there, nothing, just the carpet. Then I heard a half roll, and out of the shadow of the nightstand came a tiny gourd, about the size of a softball, with a happy face carved into it. It was resting there, and it wobbled a bit, like someone had just rolled it. I then heard a bump, and I looked up and around the floor. There had to have been a dozen pumpkins with happy faces grinning at me. I was so scared I threw my head under the covers. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't even make a scream. John came back in the room saying, "Nothing down there." I found my voice and screamed, "The floor." I pointed to where I'd seen the pumpkins, but they were all gone. I told him what I saw. He said with as much work as we'd done over the past couple of weeks, he'd be surprised if we saw anything else. He laid down and went back to sleep. I stayed up for the rest of the night. Okay. Well, that's a lot to take in. I'm setting this down for a second to see if I can let this seep in. As I'm reading this, I'm thinking maybe Nancy didn't receive a fair trial. That is, if she was to have shared in court all this that I'm reading, the temporary insanity plea might have saved her from her life sentence. It would have allowed her to stay in a low-security mental institution for as long as it would take to cure her. She'd then be able to seek release without a criminal history, but she didn't want her legacy in the town to be marred, I guess, by admitting she'd killed her husband, so she stubbornly maintained her not guilty plea and insisted that it was an intruder. But this piece of writing, I mean, if this isn't proof that your mind is slipping, I don't know what is. Maybe that's why she hid it. I don't know why she would write it down. Okay, the fifth and final entry was dated on the day of... The fifth and final entry was dated the day John's head was found, hanging there on a planter swinging in the window. Wednesday, November 1st. The page has dried blood and dried pumpkin seeds on it. She says, "Okay, I need to write up a statement for the police. It's hard to write, though, and I just tried putting down some thoughts. I can't use them, so I threw them away. They'll think I'm crazy. The skin on my hand's been itching like it's coming off, and every time I scratch at it, a little bit does. I'm bleeding a bit. This hurts. Let me try to get my thoughts together. I already told them everything. They were over here this morning, pulling John's body from the ground in the front yard. The detective said he'd come back over a little later and get my full statement. What can I tell them? That I woke up and found John next to me, dead with his head cut off. That the pumpkins ripped John's body apart with a carving knife? Maybe this. I woke up again last night to more thumping like this. Thump, thump, thumpity. But these thumps sounded muffled, like they were bouncing their way up the carpet wooden steps. I reached over to shake John, but stopped. The sound stopped outside the door. Thud, stop. Bounce, stop. The door creaked open, and the light from the hallway was creeping under the door across the threshold with something of a shadow blocking it, a hollow space. A little darkness was also flooding in. A slack-jawed pumpkin was resting on the threshold. It cast a long finger-like shadow. So, the pumpkins did it. They carved John. I saw it. Dozens of them pummeling him. One had the carving knife. They were slack-jawed and sad and laughing all at once, and they spoke to me. They didn't grow in the yard this year, they said, because they needed human blood. All they had was worms. They said they'll grow next year. They said they own this place now. At first, it was the one slack-jawed pumpkin rolling in, and it was followed by another, then another. I don't know how many ended up in the room. I just know that before John could wake up from my screams, the pumpkins leapt on him, closing their faces down on his body until he fell limp. I don't know that John ever woke up, and I must have passed out, because when I opened my eyes again, it was daylight. John was gone. There was blood on the pillow, a deep cavity of it in the hollow where his head had been. There was blood on me and on my hands, but no John. I reached over and touched the blood just to be sure. Then something snapped at my hand. An engorged gourd had jumped, been tossed onto the bed and rolled back on the floor. I called the police. I can't really tell them any of what I saw. They won't believe me. I don't believe me. But someone has already called them. They were already on their way over. They said I was screaming. They found John in a shallow grave in the front of the house. The blood had been drained out of his body. When they pulled him out of the ground, there was no head. And that is the letters. That's the end of that one. Nancy's blood appears to be on it. May have been from her scratching. And John? Well, John was dead, and that's where the public scrutiny really settled in on how Nancy, a small woman, was able to overpower and dismember her much larger husband. Killed him in his sleep, they said. The evidence was right there on his pillow. She was arrested, indicted, found guilty, and sentenced for life. Where they found an unbiased jury in that small town, I have no idea. Since very quickly the news of the bizarre killings and dismemberment spread through all forms of media. Nancy's name made it onto the front page of the Gazette, quite a few times actually, in the months that followed. Some photos of the headless corpse being exhumed from the front yard made their way onto the web. And his head? It had, after all, been meticulously prepared, like every one of those 50 pumpkins of various sizes that had lined her walkway and sidewalk. Some suspected from the lingering expression of horror that the face had been carved while John was still alive. It didn't take much detective work to identify it swinging on a planter in the window, though it took the police a full hour to notice it wasn't a Halloween decoration because of the way it had been, well, prepared for presentation. The eyes had been gouged out, the nose ripped off, and the lips melted so that they resembled a slack-jaw grin from a jack-o'-lantern. And on the base of the tongue, behind the skull where the brains would have been, was lit a candle that had not yet burned itself halfway down. Someone had put that photo on the internet too, under the heading Bizarre Halloween Murder, Sleepy Hollow Style. Nancy was adamant, though, about the lie. She said in court she'd woken up to her dead husband, who'd been murdered, she said, while lying next to her. Murdered by an intruder, not by pumpkins, like she'd written here. In any case, I'm walking to the front door now. I'm gonna go over to... Oh my gosh. Okay. Something weird. They were not up here before. They were down on the grass. They weren't up here. They weren't up here. What the...